Today we're going to go ahead and talk about the series circuit and what you should be able to do in your labs as well as on the hands-on practical. What I've got set up here is a series circuit with one light bulb. Obviously we have our power source below, our power comes in over here, we have our fuse, our switch, and we do have our one light bulb hooked up. Okay, now for your lab purposes and lab practical, you're going to be asked to measure as well as calculate voltage, amperage, and resistance. So let's first go ahead and talk about your multimeter. Now, we're going to go ahead and measure resistance of the light bulb first. And in order to do that, we're going to take our multimeter and we're going to turn it on the resistance, or turn an indicator to ohms resistance. And you'll see it says OL. What we want to do is we want to go ahead and touch our leads together, see if we're getting a reading so we know our meter is working. Okay, now that I know my meter is working, I want to go ahead and isolate my light bulb so I don't get any readings back in the circuit somewhere, or the potential to read anything back in the circuit. So I'm going to go ahead and on each side of my light bulb base, I'm going to put my probes on there and I'm going to take my ohms reading, which in this case is about 0.6. Okay? I can also do that for light bulb 2 as well. And that ends up being about 0.5. So let's go ahead and hook this back up now that I know what that is. Now I'm going to go ahead and write 0.5 down on my piece of paper so I know what this light bulb is now. Alright, so I'm going to turn on my power supply. But you'll notice that when we did our resistance, we want to make sure our power is off. We do not want to use the meter checking resistance with power on to any circuit. All right, you will definitely damage the meter, blow the fuse. Okay, so we can turn our power supply on here, and now what we want to do is we want to make sure we have voltage coming in, or measure what our voltage is coming in. So in order to do that, we'll take our meter again and we'll move it to the volts DC for this particular lab because we are working with DC voltage here. So I've got my meter on volts DC, my power supply is on, and then I'm going to go ahead and where my power is coming in, I'm going to go ahead and measure my voltage right here. I'm going to put each lead into each side of my power supply, and I'm reading about 15.36 volts. So I'll take that number and write that down on a piece of paper. So now that I know my resistance and I know my voltage coming in, I can go ahead and calculate what my amperage would be, okay, using Ohm's law. But now let's go ahead and see if we can't measure our amperage for this. But first things first, let's go ahead and turn on our light switch because we've got power on. Our light turns on, and now what we can do is see that we're in voltage. We can measure our voltage across the load, and in this case, which would be the light. So I would come across each side of my light bulb, and I'm reading about 12.13 volts. Okay, so again, I'll just take it, go right across my light bulb here, and measure my voltage. All right, so let me turn this off, and next thing we're going to do is, now that we have our calculated amperage, we can go ahead and measure our amperage. So to do that, I'm going to take my meter, and I'm going to change it to amperage DC. All right, now with that being said, I also want to take my red lead where it says volts and ohms and put it over to 10 amps, okay, with these particular meters. So now I'll be set to measure our amperage. So if you think about this, we can take this wire out that feeds back to our power supply. And what we'll do is we'll go ahead and use the meter as that wire. If I can get it to stay in there. Okay? So now we come from one side of our power source through the fuse, through the light switch, and into one side of the light, and then the other side of the light we're feeding it through our meter back to our power supply. So now our meter will be able to pick up our amperage. And remember, your amperage has to be measured in series with load. So we'll go ahead and turn our switch on. So I now know it's on, and my DC amperage is about 4.23. Okay, so that's how I'm going to measure my amperage. So I can go ahead and turn this off. So now we know what that one light bulb is. So now let's go ahead and talk about a series circuit with two light bulbs in series. So I'm just going to go ahead and hook up my light bulb, and I'll put the other wire on here. All right. So again, we know what our voltage is coming in. Okay, and we can go ahead and check the voltage again. Remember, we're going to turn it to volts DC. Okay, check our power coming in. All right, and I'm not. All right. Remember that you want to move your lead back over to voltage, otherwise you won't get a reading like I just did. And so now I've got voltage at 15.39, and I've come through my fuse again, through my switch, through light bulb 1 and through light bulb 2 and back to power. So if I go ahead and turn this on, we'll notice that our light bulbs are a little bit dimmer. Okay, so now we can go ahead and measure our voltage across each one of these light bulbs. And if I go across light bulb 1, I've got about 5.91 volts. And if I do it across light bulb 2, I come up with about 6.67 volts. All right. So we should be able to calculate on paper now. Now we know what our voltage is, and we took our resistance readings before. Now in series, we should be able to calculate our voltage drop across each load here. Now, if you recall, our amperage should stay the same in a series circuit. So I'll turn power off here. I'm going to readjust my meter back to amperage. Remember to move your terminal across to 10 amps. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and take this line off because I want to measure this in series. And I'll put my leads in the appropriate places here. One side of the light bulb, the other side going back to power. I can turn my power on. All right, and now I've got about 2.85 amps. Okay, so remember we added resistance, so our amperage, our total amperage would go down. So I can go ahead and turn this off here. All right, that's for my total, and then I can go ahead and let's check it in another spot. Let's check it coming out of the light source or light switch here. We can turn it back on. Okay, and I've got about 2.8. All right, so basically in this lab and for your performance exam, you'll need to hook up a series circuit, okay, either using light bulbs or our resistors. You should be able to calculate your voltage, amperage, and resistance. You should also be able to measure all three as well, given any of the other two. All right. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope it was helpful. Stay tuned or look for the next one in this particular series, and we're going to cover parallel circuits.